that vicinity? And are those, individual prices, or is that what would be the family rate? How is that number arrived at, the ones that's shown in the budget?
Madam Chair, I've got Ms. Zulik, the CFO, who might be able to answer that better than I can.
Sorry. Please, welcome again.
Madam Chair, members. The number in the fiscal notice composite premium of individual subsidies and small group subsidies, it's based on, for the individual subsidies, it's based on the Gruber-Gorman estimate of the 2016 projected premiums in the individual market prior to the ACA. It is then increased based on an estimated 23%, based on the Gruber-Gorman most recent numbers, said that they would increase between 15 and 29% based on ACA changes. 23% was chosen. That was based on a 3-year MSHA phase-out. And so the fiscal note assumes a 23% increase above that number. From there, that number is back down to calendar year 15 and calendar year 14 based on annual rates of growth in the prior 5 years, which I believe is 5.5%. For the small business side, the premium is based on an average growth of, I think, 5.1%, which is the historical average growth for the last few years, and trended forward to 2014, 15, and 16. It's then a blended rate based on projections.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Jurek, all right, so just picking one out of randomly, $388. That would be the blend of everything, including the federal subsidy, including whatever the consumer pays. So it's all that. Okay. And Madam Chair, Ms. Jurek, what is the range then of, it's a sliding scale, right, that comes out of the consumer's pocket. What is that range that they're going to be paying? Are they not paying?
Please. Madam Chair, members, I think what the individual pays will depend on their income.
Sure.
I don't have a table with me, but the federal government will subsidize individuals up to 400% of poverty, and there's a formula depending on your income. And I think the lower your income is, the most you would pay is some percent, which I don't have with me, and the higher income, I think the percentage goes up a little. It goes up so that the portion you pay is based on your income, and anything above that, the federal government would subsidize in the advanced premium tax credit.
Okay, so it would be helpful, Madam Chair, if someone could get me that information, I would certainly appreciate knowing what the range of prices are.
I think someone got the information right now. Did you want to ask someone up who can answer Representative Runbeck's question? That'd be great.
We'll have it momentarily, Madam
Okay, sure.
And then, Madam Chair, just another follow-up. The assumptions then, are there assumptions built in for a percentage of folks who premiums will lapse? I mean, and what is that assumption?
Madam Chair, members, there is a certain churn rate built into the enrollment assumptions. That's there will be some people that will fall off and come back onto the program over time. So that is built into the enrollment model. That it's not. We don't assume everyone is steady for 12 months every year. There is an on and off assumption within the model.
Madam Chair and Representative and Ms. Jurek, is there any sort of collections plan or involvement with the department then? I mean, assuming some people are going to go on it, stay on for a few months, maybe have some costly medical work done, and then drop the policy and cease paying. I mean, is that a likelihood, and will there be a collections process?
Madam Chair, individuals who are paying their premium can pay the plans directly. It's a choice offered to them.
Okay.
And we're working with the plans on how that would operate in terms of disenrollment for lack of payment and things like that. So.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Further? No? Okay. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I share some of the concerns about what Representative Davids expressed earlier today and some of the documents that we've received here today. We're looking at individuals having premium increases of anywhere from, I think it's 28 to 42% of insurance premium increases for individuals. I mean, I thought the whole purpose of this was actually to lower the cost of health care. And so I'm a little concerned about how that will work. I know the Congressional Budget Office also has put out information saying individuals will be paying anywhere from $4,500 to $5,000 in their insurance premiums, and then for small groups, we're looking at anywhere from $12,000 to $12,500. Now, that seems to be a lot of money here, and given the fact that what has been spent so far in trying to build the exchange, I'm a little worried about cost containment, and Representative Loon highlighted some of those too. And I'm just not quite sure that we're doing due diligence in order to contain costs. Now, I'm looking at here, you've got for FTEs, so this 3.5% premium tax, looks like mainly it's just to fund salaries, and when you compare it to what the Commerce Division has, they're at 39.8 FTEs, and yet this exchange will have 86. So we're adding 86 employees to an exchange. We already have 39.8 in the Department of Commerce, which is charged with regulating insurance, and we're almost, we are doubling what we're going to have then for just the exchange itself. And I'm just curious, why so many FTEs, and what truly are you trying to do to help contain costs? And can you talk a little bit more about the salaries and how much of that 3.5% tax is going to be funding salaries, especially a year before anybody can access the exchange?
Representative Atkins?
Well, Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, and I'll look to Ms. Malmlove to help me out here. But let's start with your first comment, which was 26 to 42% increases in premiums as a result of the exchange. That's not correct. That is something that as a result of the Affordable Care Act, I expect, and Representative Davids, I'm sure, shares this comment, an observation that we expect to see that as an increase. The exchange, though, the point of vibrant competition is to actually bring prices down. And to have a good, robust marketplace that will drive prices the opposite as opposed to increasing them. So to the extent, and if all members could listen to that, I'd appreciate it, because we keep talking about increases that are solely attributable to the Affordable Care Act, not to the exchange. And as we sit here tonight, we're talking about up to a 3.5% withhold. And then we also have this, I don't know where that number keeps coming from, I'm guessing it's in your pink sheet or your green sheet, about the yellow sheet now, that the Department of Commerce has 35 FTEs, and I've heard it be a variety of numbers. The Department of Commerce has 350 FTEs. That's their ask. They're about a little, just over 300 now. And the use of the funds is not solely for salaries, though that is a piece of it. But we also have to build an IT structure or system. We've got to get a call center up and running, fund navigators. There's a whole variety of things that go well beyond just staffing costs. But I appreciate the opportunity to answer that. To the extent I missed anything, I'm sure Ms. Malmlove can help out.
Someone's phone must be by the mic. That's what that buzzing is. So people have their phone by the mic. Could turn it off. Representative Anderson, further?
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, Ms. Malmoff could maybe address, since she's been kind of putting together the whole grant budget. And this was some information that we received at the Department of Commerce hearing. And we're looking at salaries here of well over $1 million in salaries alone. In fact, by November of 2012, it looks on the salary category, we have a total of $6.6 million there. That doesn't include the benefits. You tack on another $2.1 million on benefits, and then total cost of $8.8 million alone just in salaries and benefits for employees of the exchange. To me, that seems rather excessive, and I'm concerned that we are basically asking these small businesses and individuals to foot a cost of, a bureaucratic network that isn't really about providing them with affordable care. And I guess I'd like to know from Ms. Malmnoff what you have done to actually try to rein in costs, what comparisons you've done to other states that have set up these things, and can you give me a little more details, and then I have one more question after that.
Yeah, please, and I'm going to go with that and have you answer that, but we're way off revenue, folks. Just want to remind everybody here, we're on a few pages of the fiscal note. Just to put it in perspective, if we were raising the income tax right now to fund the K-12 area, we would not ask the K-12 committee author to come in and justify why they're not funding the classroom this way or that. So Representative Anderson has this question. She probably doesn't serve on any other committee that's already heard this bill, so if you could please answer it, but we really do want to get on to revenue so we can start the amendments. Welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair, my name is April Todd Mumlove. I'm the Exchange Director. Representative Anderson, to your question around essentially the FTE levels that are in the exchange and the budget that's there, the FTE levels that we're looking at are very similar to what other states are doing. Actually, when you look at the full budget cost to what we have in Minnesota, we are one of the bottom states in terms of the budget that's there. Every other state that we have looked at, they have a higher budget. They have a higher per person cost per enrollment. We have done everything that we can to keep that cost at a low level. I think there was another question earlier as well, and sorry, I was coming in at the time that the question was being asked, but we can answer the question around income limits for the subsidies as well. For a family of 4 at 400% of the federal poverty level, it's around $88,000 for a family of 4. You can also do the math here as well. At 100% FPG, it's around $23,000 for a family of 4. So if you do the math, around what 200% of poverty, 300% of poverty would be, you can get a sense of where those income limits would be for eligibility for the subsidies.
Thank you. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Malnoff, we had testimony earlier today that says that this isn't anywhere comparable to other states. In fact, we had a state of Michigan that was offered at $36 million, and you're looking at an operating cost of $60 million. So I would strongly disagree with what you just said here. But the other thing I wanted to raise to you, Madam Chair, is Representative Loeffler earlier today had mentioned that Hennepin County pays for, or counties, I should say, not just Hennepin County, all counties pay for the enrollment costs out of their property taxes. And given the fact that this is obviously going to have an impact on local property taxes, it might be good if this bill actually goes to the property tax division so we can see actually what the impact is going to be for property taxpayers across the state of Minnesota as well.
Representative Atkins, does this bill raise property taxes?
Madam Chair, I'm not tracking that at all. We're talking about up to a 3.5% withhold from the premiums that are paid. That's all that's in the bill.
Madam Chair.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Loeffler, I heard you earlier today talk about the fact that counties pay for the enrollment costs. This would still be part of it. Can you maybe explain that a little bit more?
Okay. Representative Loeffler, feel free to answer the question.
Thank you,
We'd like to
Madam
get
Chair.
back on the
Counties
revenue.
will do what they've always done, which is handle the enrollment assistance for people and medical assistance, and that is done in part, and always has been, with the counties contributing match to the MA program. The exchange will actually reduce county costs to the degree that we take the computer systems that we have heard in Health and Human Services are so old. They're decades old. It has not been taught in any school program how to write these programs for decades. And this is finally going to allow them to step up to actually modern programming and fast, efficient computer systems, so we're hopeful this will actually reduce county costs.
Representative Anderson. Please.
Madam Chair, I would hope that we'd get a fiscal note that reflects that to some degree. I know that we have the fiscal note here, but I'm not sure that it actually covers that piece.
Thanks for the request. Representative Atkins, I'm not really sure, what are you asking? Are you referring the bill somewhere? I mean, this is the fiscal note. It's got all the revenue impacts. This is the tax committee.
Sure.
According to the fiscal note, there are no property tax inputs. The property tax chair is in the back. So, I'm not going to formally request that, but if you personally want to request somebody to get you more information than this.
Madam Chair, I think that would be helpful, just
Okay.
so that we know that we're not adding to a burden or what kind of change that we're talking about when it comes to property taxes for people.
So I think folks have heard that here. Representative Anderson has a request for you to get her some information, so hope you can do that for her. Further questions, Representative Anderson? That's it. Okay, thank you. Representative Myra.
Madam Chair, thank you. Representative Atkins, when you combine all the federal taxes plus the 3.5% gross premiums tax, how does health care become more affordable?
Is your question for Representative Atkins, or?
Well, whomever.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Myra, when you, I guess I'm not tracking what your question is. I get that the Affordable Care Act, if that's where you're going, that doesn't allow people to be turned down for care, is likely to cause an increase in premiums. I haven't argued that at all.
Okay.
But then when you have plans competing for your business, I'm just a small little business guy in South St. Paul and got to buy health insurance. When I have folks compete for my business, which right now really doesn't happen, quite honestly. I don't have much leverage, nor do most small businesses to do their shopping for health insurance. And I suspect, though, that like any other competitive market where folks have to compete for business, that's likely to drive up quality and drive down prices to a little bit more affordable level. And that's, according to the modeling, the anticipated, for a small business anyway, is about a 7.5% savings as a result of that competitiveness that will enter the marketplace as a result of having an exchange. In addition to that, there's also the possibility of getting subsidies, tax credits from the federal government for both individuals and businesses. And the expectation is that the average Minnesota family that participates will save about $490. Some will save more. Some, if my family were to purchase, for example, wouldn't save anything as a result of the tax credits, but would hopefully have a little bit more competitive price as a result of the more vibrant competition for our business.
Madam Chair, one more comment. How this has affected my family already is that we have been going to a clinic for the last 9 years, and we got a notice about a month and a half ago that starting April 15th, they will only be on a cash basis, and our family will not be able to afford to pay for medical services on a cash basis. So after having built a relationship with our doctors at that clinic, we're going to have to go back and find another place to go. So it has turned out not to be affordable for our family. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Mack is back, so we're going to call on her again. Representative Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate your flexibility. Just a couple of comments and then a question for, I think it'll be for Ms. Julich in regards to the fiscal note. But earlier, I believe Mr. Varco had made a comment looking at other states' exchanges, and he had referenced the Utah exchange, and I just thought it was worth noting that the Utah exchange cost about $600,000 to create with about 3 employees, and it's essentially just a clearinghouse. And I will give that there have been comments from the federal government that they have to make some tweaks to that. So I will admit that part of it. But even if you add $10 million to that, they're at $10,600,000 on their exchange versus our $165 million with dozens of employees. So I think that just begs a question of are we really doing what's necessary to make this thing work, or are we going way beyond and being a bit irresponsible with taxpayer dollars? And then just one other statement, and I feel kind of bad. Both times I've gotten to hear Ms. Brighton testify on behalf of some of her small businesses that she represents. I feel as though she's testifying to some misnomers and is maybe misinformed or isn't aware of a couple of issues, so I haven't been able to respond when she's been here. But she has commonly testified that because of the exchange, she'll have better rates for, or groups will be able to negotiate better rates, and she has mentioned that the exchange will stabilize pricing, and neither of which I see substantiated anywhere in the language. And I guess I'm confused, and if maybe Ms. Melmolov or Representative Atkins can comment, is there anything in this that points to us that the exchange can negotiate better rates for the groups, or where are testifiers getting that idea that they're going to get better rates for the group? So I guess just those couple of comments in response to some of the testimony we heard today that I just don't see substantiated anywhere in this bill. The question I have in terms of revenue, I'm looking at the consolidated fiscal note that we had in HHS Finance, which I realize probably not everybody has, but there's a number that's changed under revenues on the front page. Previously, under revenue, it says health insurance exchange, and the number in 2014 is the same at $21.9 million. But in fiscal year 15 through fiscal year 17, from the last fiscal note, the numbers have changed by a few million in each category, and I'm wondering why. I don't think we've added any amendments that have a fiscal impact, or maybe we have. So if you could just clarify why that number changed under revenue.
Please, Ms. Julick.
Madam Chair, members, the numbers changed because there's an inflationary cap put on the total amount that may be collected by the exchange. And so the fiscal note, once the 15 rate is assumed, 16 and 17 is capped by the rate of inflation, and that's the difference.
Okay.
Representative Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just that clarifies that. Thank you. And then just one other clarification on something that was talked about earlier when we were talking about the MCHA assessment. We were questioning whether or not there's going to be overlap where that tax is going to be happening while we're collecting the 3.5% premium tax. And I understand that under the Gruber-Gorman report, they're assuming a 3-year phase-out of the MCHA tax. So if we follow the Gruber-Gorman report as closely as we have been so far in terms of getting these numbers, there's a very likely chance that we'll see an overlap of both taxes being collected at the same time.
Thank you. Representative Atkins, you talked about this once before. Did you want to mention that again?
Madam Chair, subsequent to the Gruber-Gorman report, we've had additional guidance from the feds about reinsurance pooling that would take place and that would work to the detriment of the state of Minnesota the longer that we were to keep our MCHA system up and running. So there is now an incentive to wrap the MCHA board sooner than later. If we keep it running, it'll just be continuing to send money out of Minnesota that will never come back. Prior to that guidance from the federal government, there wasn't a whole lot of incentive to wrap MCHA any sooner. But at this point, there probably is. The one thing I want to emphasize, though, is that we have no intention of leaving anyone behind or having any gaps in coverage for those people who are currently covered by MCHA. We want that to be a smooth handoff from MCHA to the exchange.
Representative Mack, further? Okay. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of thoughts here, a couple of points, then a question. As I'm looking at the numbers here, the Commerce Insurance Division for 2015 is expected to spend $8.8 million. They regulate auto insurance, homeowners, farm, health, life, securities, all insurance. We have a little website we're creating here, and it's costing $82 million. That seems either extremely excessive, or I don't know if I'd call it empire building, or what we're doing. So we have the Commerce Department Insurance Division overseeing all insurances for $8 million, and it costs 10 times that for a little website that the companies could easily do. Employees, Commerce Insurance Division. Now, to correct Representative Atkins, well, not to correct him, Commerce has 360 employees. That's a fact. The Insurance Division has 39. Commerce does many things, weights and measures, all sorts of things. Exchange employees, 86 full-time equivalents for a little website versus Commerce overseeing all insurance. And then I guess if Ms. Malmoff could come up, I've got a question for her. In the Commerce Committee, we had testimony. We had one, Representative Atkins and others have said we have to have vibrant competition. This will create vibrant competition. There's so much competition. Then we had, I think, the AARP and some other groups say, well, we need to limit how many companies can get in there. How do we balance saying we have vibrant competition when you would have the authority to say this company can come in, this one cannot, this one can come in, this one cannot? How? Unless you allow everybody in, and I really appreciate the goal that Chair Atkins is going for, to have vibrant competition. But if you have the ability to limit, as many of your supporters are saying we should do, we must limit how many companies are in there. It was a very odd hearing in the Commerce Committee where they said we needed all this competition, and then we have the ARP and other groups come up and say, let's not have any competition, let's just pick one or two and call it a day. So how do we get to vibrant competition when you can limit who comes in, even though they've been approved by Commerce Department?
Please, again, not on revenue, but I think
Oh, this is very
committee-
much to revenue.
Okay.
Very much.
You could
This is
answer Representative
This is
David.
all sorts of revenue here.
You know, and I know people are frustrated about the active purchaser versus the other thing, and then, you know, is this too much money for this? Is the scope too big? How do you limit competition? Should they all be? But really, we're dealing with the revenue part of this bill. So, you know, I'm trying to let everyone get everything said they need to say, but at some point, we are simply going to deal with the revenue, please.
And Madam Chair, I really do appreciate that. I really do. But Chair Atkins about 4 or 5 times has brought up vibrant competition. And I want to know how we have vibrant competition when we limit competition.
Representative Atkins, will you stop bringing up vibrant competition?
I'm never going to use the word again.
And no, seriously, I mean, I don't want to rein anything in. I understand that. I just, we do have amendments, and we are going to stay here till they're all done, folks. So I noticed the amount of small children here, and
Madam Chair, I will, out of respect for what you're saying, I'll withdraw my question, but we
No.
will have it on the floor. I respect what you're saying, and it's kind of hard to, I mean, when we're spending $82 million to figure out how that doesn't have to do with financing, but that's fine.
Representative David, no, I do think, you know, it's fine to answer it. I just, I know that a lot of people have been on these other hearings. I have not. I've never heard this bill. But a lot of the people asking a lot of the questions have actually heard the bill a few times already. And I've found that Representative Atkins is very accessible to answer questions. And you know, you're asking a question you need to have the answer to, and I think we should have the answer. But I do, you know, people should know that this bill is in here simply for that single purpose. Should it be the 3.5% withhold, or should it be something else? That's what we're supposed to be addressing. And if you could answer Representative David's questions, that would be helpful.
Well, and Madam Chair, maybe we should start with the why it costs a little bit more to run this little website, as Representative Davids likes to call it. That question's been answered multiple times for the same members, sometimes many times over. So if you're sensing my frustration, that's because there is frustration. But Ms. Malmlov can perhaps walk through what how that money is going to be spent, so that folks at home who are watching, I'm sure, don't think we're spending $82 million for a little website. Ms. Malmlov.
Well, Madam Chair, I was not
Representative
asking about that. I was asking, we've heard vibrant competition, and I was just making comments about empire building and how this is 10 times larger than the Commerce Insurance Division. But my question is, how do we have vibrant competition when you're limiting competition?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I'd like to answer that question too, but before I do that, I'd like to fix the misleading statement that Representative Davids made. And I think that calls out for an answer, even though he may not phrase it in the form of a question. It certainly requires a response.
Please.
So, Madam Chair, to respond to Representative Atkins' request, so the exchange is not just a website. I would clarify that. There are a variety of things that the exchange needs to do. It needs to have it is a website, but it also has customer service activities. Those customer service activities need to be conducted through a call center, in person, by mail, via fax. It also needs to do eligibility determinations for medical assistance and for premium tax credits. It's going to be assisting small employers with access to insurance through the exchange. It also needs to provide comparative information on cost, quality, and customer satisfaction in addition to the benefits. It needs to make sure that the plans participating in the exchange are complying with federal standards. Also needs to have an appeals process. So those people that feel that they were determined ineligible, for example, have an appeal right to be able to do that. So there's an appeals process as well. We also need to have a navigator program. So boots on the ground to provide individuals with assistance and doing outreach to get those people enrolled. And so there is a very big difference between that and a website. There's also a very large difference there, I think, too, to Representative Mack's comment earlier about the Utah exchange, is that They are helping small businesses find insurance. They are not doing eligibility enrollment. They're not doing a call center. They're not doing customer service. They're not doing appeals. They're not doing all of these functions that do require staff and funds.
Madam Chair, at this point now, I'd be happy to answer the question about why the selector. And the reason for that is because I think all across this country, folks have found that, and I used an example in the last committee about if there's only 400 slots available in a college class, and you've got a couple thousand or 5,000 or 7,000 applicants, it allows the selection committee to pick the very best applicants. Kind of how America works. You know, we may not always like it, but it is sort of how things work. And you get folks to put their best foot forward and work really hard and put together the best option and then seek to get it approved. That's why the selector, and whether it's people applying for college or any number of other scenarios, that's the thought behind the selector approach.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chair Atkins, for that. It just when I look at these numbers, I just think we're building a super agency with no accountability. I don't see any accountability here, but that's not a finance issue, so I am done.
And, Madam Chair, to answer that question, which is phrased in the form of a comment but is also misleading, the legislative auditor has the full approval of the body already. It's been amended and will be auditing this agency once a year as a result of a Republican amendment that was put on in a previous committee. So thank you, Representative Davids, for the question.
And Madam Chair and Chair Atkins, I was not aware of that, so I don't resemble those remarks, but I stand corrected.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we have Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Atkins, we've been talking a lot about the 3.5%. Can you show me in the bill where that is? I've been looking for it. I have yet to find it.
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, if Paige would bring me a copy of the bill, I could point out the 3.5%.
Mr. Michael, do you know where it is?
Madam Chair, Representative Barrett, it's on page 8, subdivision 2, the 3.5% appears in all three of those paragraphs, A, B, and C, because they apply to different time periods.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And so the question I have relates to the fiscal note. As we look at the fiscal year 14, 15, 16, and 17, fiscal year 14 and 15, we're actually developing a cash balance, which appears to be roughly $33 billion at the end of fiscal year 15. Do you have the fiscal note in front of you, Representative Atkins?
And Representative Barrett, you might have been out. This question has been asked, I think, a couple times, 3 times maybe now. So I think Representative Atkins knows the question, right? You're wondering why it appears there's a 14 balance in there?
No.
Oh, okay. Representative Barrett.
Thank you. Representative Atkins, if you have it in front of you, then we go to fiscal year 2016, and we have revenue of $53 million, $55 million. Then we have costs. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, can you tell me what page you're on of the fiscal note? So we can all follow along. 15?
Page 1.
Oh, page 1. Okay, great. Thank you.
So we have a fund balance of about $33 billion, and then we go to fiscal year 16. Is that true, Madam Chair? Are we all following?
You're right here. That's where we're at.
53 million, yes.
Yep.
Did I say billion? 53 million. So then the next year, then we have 53 million in revenue, 55 million in revenue. We have costs of 57 million and 60 million. So in 16 and 17, we're developing a net loss for those 2 years. Would you agree with that, Representative Atkins?
Representative Atkins.
Representative Barrett, I'm just going through to the extent you've cited the fiscal note correctly, yes, although you've been saying billion rather than million.
Yeah, so
Representative
apologies. Yep. So we have a net loss in the first, in 16 and 17. If we're off, if the revenue in 15 and 16 and 17, if they're off by 15%, which is not a lot, you know, when you do projections, as I've done for many, many years, being off by 15% is really typical. You're going to burn through that balance. You're going to burn through your $33 billion in about 2 years. Million. You're going to burn through your $33 million in about 2 years. If that happens, what do? Do we raise that 3.5%? Or what is Plan B in that scenario, which is probably fairly likely, in my opinion?
Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Barrett. Most of the expenditures and revenues and expenditures that come in and go out are a function of enrollment. So to the extent that the enrollment is higher, we'll have more revenues coming in and greater expenditures going out. To the extent that they're lower, which is what you're anticipating perhaps, we'll have fewer revenues, but we'll also have fewer expenditures going out as well.
Representative Barrett, please.
One final question then. Thank you, Representative Atkins. And why do we need to collect revenue in 14 and 15 if the expenses are variable?
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, Representative Barrett, part of it is the startup costs of the operation. The federal grant only goes so far and then cuts off. So you've got the startup expenses and then just some basic cash flow. And if you want, Ms. Julie can come up and walk you through that more thoroughly, but that's the essence of it.
Representative Barrett.
One final question, and back to your thoughts about the expenses being variable. In 16 and 17, if the revenues go down, the expenses will go down. Is that true of the full-time equivalents, or would that be considered a fixed expense? And I'm just curious if that's what is most likely a fixed expense. What other fixed expenses are there that actually won't go down, which would justify my point of a bad situation if we don't hit the revenue targets?
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, Representative Barrett, certainly there's some fixed expenses, but to the extent that if the exchange does not prove to work as well as we would hope, or the models are too optimistic, I would expect those fixed expenses would be reduced as well. Some of the investments will be made beforehand in the IT infrastructure and so forth. I don't expect that will be reduced, but certainly if it doesn't, if the numbers don't bear out, I'd expect those fixed figures to go down as well.
Thank you.
Representative Barrett. Representative Dabney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is just to the department. When I came in, Representative Anderson was requesting information about the potential property tax impact.
Yes.
And I just want to request that the department focus in on the net impact because with the expansion of coverage to people who currently don't have coverage, we should hopefully see a significant reduction in uncompensated care. And Hennepin County Medical Center, of course, has the highest uncompensated care level in the state. In 2011, it was $30 million. 75% of uncompensated care costs are covered by the public. And that, of course, would include property taxpayers in Hennepin County. And, of course, HCMC is the uncompensated care capital of the state because people from around the state come to HCMC in order to receive care that isn't available in their communities and don't always then have the insurance coverage to allow them to pay for it. So there should be a positive impact to the exchange and the expansion of access to health care on property taxpayers, hopefully across the state, but certainly in Hennepin County, that should be reflected in any work that I'd ask to be reflected in any work that does.
And actually,
Thank
Madam,
you. Appreciate that. Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, to Representative Dabney's point, a week ago Thursday, that report came out from MDH showing $150 million in savings as a result of that uncompensated care.
I wasn't.
Representative.
I wasn't aware of that, Representative Atkins. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative, you were done. Dabney. Representative Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief question that I think hopefully we'll have a quick answer. But looking back at these revenue numbers and what we're expecting the exchange to bring in from the premium tax, I know that the bill allows for a 3.5% withhold. And Representative Atkins, I've heard you talk about that. It's expected that we will be able to run it at a 2.25% withhold. I'm wondering, are these numbers assuming the 3.5 or the 2.25?
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, Ms. Julick can tell you specifically what the percentage was that was used.
Please.
Madam Chair, members, for calendar year 14, 3.5% was assumed under each enrollment scenario, and then based on the enrollment and the cost, a variety. Depending on the enrollment, for example, in the high enrollment, it's about a 2%, and then shrinking down below that over time. Under the medium, it's about 2.25, and under the low, about 2.7.
So, Madam Chair, if I'm looking at page 1, where it's not necessarily the high, medium, low scenarios, I'm just looking at the line under revenues, health insurance exchange, where it's 21.9 million in 14, 52.1. what is that, what are those assuming? Is that an average of the medium, high, and or low, medium, and high, or what is that?
Madam Chair, Representative, that reflects the high enrollment. So again, in calendar year 14, it's 3.5%, and if your calendar year and fiscal years have that odd kind of overlap. So in calendar year 14 was 3.5%, calendar year 15, 2.1%, calendar year 16, because of the inflationary cap, it's about 1.5% ongoing under the high enrollment scenario.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And fiscal year 17, was that also then the 1.5% assumption?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To that point, so just restate then, if you would, the $53 million is based on high enrollment?
Madam Chair, Representative, correct.
Madam Chair, Representative Atkins, you said earlier that this is based on the medium enrollment. Did I just hear you wrong earlier today?
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, Representative Barrett, the figure that I've cited of 2.25% is based on a medium enrollment scenario, and that is actually what's reflected in FY15. We're hopeful then that by 16 and 17 we'll have a higher enrollment.
Representative Barrett.
Madam Chair, thank you. To the testifier, could you help me out?
I'll let Ms. Julich, I've been 0.25% off, Representative Barrett, but if you'd like to hear that from, my bad.
Madam Chair, members, the front page of the fiscal note does reflect a high enrollment scenario, just for the purpose of needing to pick a scenario to reflect. The range between the various scenarios of where the premium withhold may falls primarily between that 1.75 and 2.25 that's been quoted, and I think that's where the range of the premium has been.
Madam Chair. If you could help me out once more. When we talk about a high enrollment, we're talking about the number of people enrolled in the plan?
Madam Chair, Representative, yes, the number of people enrolling through the exchange, yes.
Through the exchange. So from a numerical perspective, what is the numerical difference between high enrollment and medium enrollment?
That is reflected, Madam Chair, on page 7. Actually, it starts on the bottom of page 6. And so the way it's calculated, again, taking those 2016 estimates for enrollment for the various categories, the subsidized groups, the non-subsidized individuals, and then the group coverage. Just as an example, for 2014, phasing them in at various rates, 40%, 50%, or 60%. At the bottom of Table 2, and you'd need to exclude Medicaid from this, and you'd have to do some really fast math in your head. But as an example, in the low enrollment scenario for calendar year 14, it's about 168,000 participants. The high enrollment scenario, it's a little over 300,000. I'm adding those numbers up very quickly. And that's in calendar year 14. And so those are the columns you'd compare.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in 2015, the difference between the medium enrollment, as was previously mentioned, and the high enrollment is the difference between 333,000 and 259,000 enrollees. Do I have that correct?
In calendar year 15, the difference in enrollment, again, doing math at night, is about between 230,000 and 450 or 60,000. You need to add, if you're looking on page 7, very top, and for calendar 15, it's the middle 3 columns. So the low enrollment would be 185,000 subsidized individuals plus 32,000 non-subsidized individuals plus 26,000 small group, and whatever that total is, as compared to, in the high enrollment, 333,000 subsidized, 80,000 non-subsidized, and 78,000 small group. And again, adding all three of those, and those are the two comparative numbers.
So if I do my math correctly, the low is 243,000, the medium 375, and the high 491, roughly.
Sure.
So we're talking about a difference of 116,000 people between what was previously mentioned as being numbers based on the medium and what you had corrected being 491,000. So our estimates are based on the most positive outlook on this program. which to me tells me there's a huge amount of variability and a huge risk to somebody, the plans, individuals, the government, I'm not sure which at this point, but there's a tremendous amount of risk here. And as of yet, we haven't really acknowledged that. And so I guess I would like to acknowledge that huge risk we have when we're doing our projections based on a high enrollment. That can only go down.
Thank you. Was there a question? No. Otherwise, Representative Pepin's up. Sure. Okay. Representative Pepin. And then we're going to go to Representative Loeffler's amendment. We've now got a lot of people who have been on the list 3 times since we asked Representative Loeffler to wait. We can go back to questions, but we're going to go to Representative Loeffler next. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize because this isn't directly related to the topic at hand, but it is related to a comment an exchange between Representative Davids and Representative Atkins. Representative Davids had mentioned the lack of accountability in the bill, which has been my concern, and then Representative Atkins talked about that it was subject to the legislative auditor, and I haven't seen this bill for quite a while since government operations. It's gone through several committees, and the issue that I had during government operations was that the board exempted itself from rulemaking, and the had some issues with the appeal process, and I'm wondering if there is more accountability now, because you said there's accountability, if you could talk about rulemaking and where the bill is at with that.
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, Representative Pepin, I'd be happy to talk about rulemaking. We got a lot of good input going through the committee process and actually adopted, I believe that the Senate, I think now is down to about a 21-day rulemaking process. We originally, as you know, had a complete exemption from rulemaking. The purpose served behind that was that in order to accommodate and meet the federal requirements, we weren't able to go with the 6-month or the 2-year either expedited or normal rulemaking process without running afoul of the federal approvals and therefore ending up with a federal exchange. We settled on a 30 actually 2 back-to-back 30-day, so you've got a 30-day period in which rules will be made, and then followed by another 30-day period during which the rules will be published and finally go into effect. So it's a 2-month process that would now be called for, and obviously it would invite public comment and be publicly noticed. The one exception to that is in the first few months, when in order to comply with the federal approval process, it would be effective upon publication at the 30-day mark. We'd still go through the public input elements, and then at the 30-day mark, we'd publish, and the rules would be effective at that time. That goes through January 1 of 2014, at which time we'd have the 2-month approach, which is what, I don't know how many days that is longer than, 39 days longer than what the Senate has, but still not quite the 6-month process that we have in the expedited rulemaking.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I know that this isn't the topic of this committee, but that just brought that up to my attention when we talked about accountability. And I'm not sure that I'm completely happy with where the rulemaking. I was very unhappy that of the exemption from the rulemaking authority. I'm still not quite sure why. After I understand the deadline and why you want an expedited process going forward, but I'm not sure why this can't have the same rulemaking process going forward as everything else. Why, in other words, what makes this different going forward than everything else that's required to follow a specific rulemaking process?
Madam Chair, Representative Pepin, because unlike so many other things that the state does, in terms of carrying out its responsibilities, this is a marketplace that needs to respond to what's going on in the market. And if there is, for example, navigators need additional guidance to respond to new product lines that are being offered in the market, it would be best if they got that sort of guidance and those rules within 60 days rather than 6 months after, by the time of which the product may yet morph into something additional or something new or different. So that's why we've tried to expedite it, but we appreciated the comments in committee about having a complete exemption was probably not a good way to go either.
Right.
Thank you, and maybe the two of you can work on that together and in another committee. Representative Peppin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more comment. I'm not sure, still, Representative Atkins, that this, that we can say that there's complete accountability here because, and I'm going far afield, just to make the comment, though, that this still is I would consider it a super agency with very, very little authority that the legislature would have over it. There's a lot of reasons why this is getting a lot different treatment, and I wish we would really look more at the accountability aspect of it. We're past government operations. We talked about it a lot there. I don't see some of those things changing, and but I would suspect we'll talk about it more on the floor.
Thank you. So Representative Loeffler moves the H005A189. Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before we broke, I did describe this. It basically covers the training requirements for the brokers and provides that they're going to have disclosure in both the individual market and in the small group market of what has changed. I mean, the market is changing because of the federal law, and that they inform people of the potential tax benefits available to purchasers, whether they're in either of those two markets.
Representative Atkins.
Madam Chair, I'll let my comments suffice what I said earlier. They're already on the record.
Okay, questions on the amendment?
Madam Chair.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick here. If you could just explain me, I understand the Section 125s, and we should be advising folks of that, and I understand that. But I'm a little perplexed here on, it says the training must include online enrollment tools, compliance, and privacy security standards. Okay, that's fine. We're talking about the agents here, an assessment of the affordability of various cost-sharing responsibilities. I get that. But then it says how to evaluate health risks for that individual and the likely health risks. How are you going to have insurance agents? I mean, they're brilliant, wonderful Americans. But how do you, I feel like I'm a medical doctor here. I've got to evaluate the health risks, evaluate the likely health risks for various age groups. I mean, do I take blood pressure? Do I take blood tests, urine tests? What do I do here?
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative David. Right now, when people are applying for individual insurance and also in small group markets, they're often asked for a complete health history, everything that's happened to you since you were born practically, so that they can evaluate health risk. Under the new market and the Affordable Care Act, we don't have pre-existing conditions, so we're not going to do that kind of underwriting. But agents are still going to want to ask people some basic questions like, do you happen to take a lot of prescriptions? Because then we'll look more at what prescription drug coverage options are. And so even though and agents are not used to evaluating that without that nice long health history that they've had in the past for underwriting, it's just making people aware that the market has changed and what they can do within that changed market.
Well, Madam Chair and Representative Loeffler, agents they fill out applications, but they in no way evaluate risk. I mean, they don't evaluate the risk. The underwriters do. And so you're kind of making me nervous here that we're creating a whole new class of super agents that it says here to evaluate health risk, and agents do not do that. Now, they do not want to do that. They are not trained to do that. There are other people like doctors and underwriters that do that. You might want to work on that as it goes forward.
Madam Chair and Representative Davids, I have worked with the brokers, and they actually thought this language worked. Maybe you want to redefine, if a better word than risk is there, that would be great. But the concept is that you're going to look at what health services are most important to them, given what they know about their own health needs and likely purchases under the new policy.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Loeffler, the health risk isn't the big thing, it's the evaluation thereof. You don't want us evaluating health risk. A lot of people would die.
Representative Loeffler.
Be glad to work with you on language that you're more comfortable with, and others.
Representative Liebling to the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a suggestion, Representative Loeffler. Maybe the word you want there is health needs rather than health risks in both of those
Atkins,
spots.
Representative Loeffler.
Madam Chair, I'd be comfortable with health needs. I understand when sometimes you use the word risk and you get the actuaries excited. So I would move to delete risks on line 1.4 and substitute needs.
Madam
Everyone
Chair.
have the amendment to the amendment?
Madam Chair, I need to correct Representative Loeffler. Actuaries do not get excited.
Okay, so to the author of the base bill here, and we'll go to Representative Liebling next. But do you understand the amendment to the labeling amendment? I mean, to the Loeffler amendment? Yes. Okay.
I do, Madam.
Representative Labeling.
Madam Chair, I got you confused between Liebling and Loeffler. But there are two places you need to make the change. Representative Loeffler, on the next line, 1.5, I think you might want to make it there as well.
Representative Loeffler incorporates that into her amendment.
I do, Madam Chair.
Okay. Other questions on the amendment? Representative Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a question for Representative Loeffler. We spoke a little bit earlier about this amendment and spoke at length about it in Health and Human Services Finance. But my question is, there's still a lot of questions as this whole issue moves forward about the role of brokers and navigators and in-person assisters and things of that nature. And I am wondering if you would be open to the idea of, I'm trying to think of the best place where it would fit, possibly following the period on line 1.8, but stating that the training requirements would also apply to navigators. My fear is that will create a competitive disadvantage to brokers. Right now, I don't know that the boundaries are clear between brokers and navigators. Are they interchangeable? Are they not? And so I'm trying to ensure that we're creating a level playing field for those various roles within the exchange.
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Mack. Actually, much of this language parallels what is already in the bill for navigators. It was the training was there in terms of security standards, et cetera. Much of this parallels that, so that it's clear that they both will. The difference is that the navigators will not be selling small group policies. The insurance brokers will. So there's some minor differences there, but otherwise they both have to undergo training related to the basics on this.
Okay, Representative Loon, was your question on the amendment, or are you still waiting? Thank you.
Oh, and Madam,
Further questions on the amendment? Representative Mack.
sorry, Madam Chair, just to follow up on my comment, I was trying to line up the language, and so Representative Loeffler, I will go with that for now, because it does seem very similar. I thought I noticed a couple differences, but maybe we can work on that before the floor if there are any major gaps there. Thanks.
Thank you. Other folks on the amendment, Representative Runbeck, were you trying to? No. Okay. Unless there's someone else who wants to speak on the amendment, we're going to, Representative Loeffler, do you want to renew your motion on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd renew my amendment to pass amended H0005A189.
All those in favor, say aye.
As amended.
All those in favor of the amendment as amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The amendment is adopted. Further amendments? Representative Loon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I don't have an amendment, but I do have a question for either Representative Atkins or maybe Ms. Julich. Just, in listening to some of the questions that Representative Barrett and others asked, and there's been a lot of comments about how the Affordable Care Act and having, there's no pre-existing condition that takes people out of the market going into this, and premiums may go up. I'm just concerned about these projections and how we're trying to match the revenues for the 3.5% withhold to cover that and feel comfortable about it. With the premiums all projected to go up with that, I mean, you could have a fair number of people just opt out and say, I'm going to pay the tax, pay the penalty, and not enroll in insurance. So what is sort of the bottom line number of participation that we have to have for the 3.5% to work? And if we fall below that number, this just doesn't operate. And then what happens? So is that number available?
Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Loon. I don't have that number. I suspect Ms. Julich might be able to take a little better shot at it. Just so we're clear, though, as she comes up here, the figures that we have and that we base the enrollment on aren't something that we pulled out of the air that I came up with or Ms. Julich or Ms. Malmlob came up with. Dr. Gruber is an MIT health economist. He's widely regarded as being the foremost expert on these subjects. So when he gives us figures that are low, medium, and high, I think those are as accurate as we're possibly going to get. But that doesn't necessarily answer your question. I just wanted to assure people that it wasn't just some number that we pulled out of the air. As far as what's the minimum number that we need to operate, Ms. Julich might be able to take a little bit better swing at that than I can.
Thank you.
Please.
Madam Chair, members, Under the low enrollment scenario, we're still looking at probably somewhere in the 2.5% premium withhold, so it'd have to be significantly below that low enrollment scenario, which was projecting, I think, in the first year, 40% of the end numbers, and then I think it went 50 and 60%. So it would need to be significantly below that projection.
Representative Loon, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you say significantly below, for example, if only 20% of the projected population enrolled, would that mean that the 3.5% would not be adequate to operate the exchange?
Madam Chair, Representative, I think I'd have to run the scenario out. I know I had looked at cutting it in half, which would be 20%, 25%, and 30%, and that's you're getting pretty close to 3.5%. I'd have to look at a flat rate of 20%, but like I said, Madam Chair, even if I cut the low in half, it had been about 3.5%.
Representative Loon?
Okay, so at the, I think I heard you correctly, at the 20%, cutting that in half, the 3.5 would maybe just squeak by and cover it, but below that, we would not be covered. So, okay, thank you. That's helpful. Again, and I know we use the best numbers we have, but we have had recently a scenario with a bill that, we're watching closely in Commerce Committee, where our best projections maybe don't come to fruition. So I think that's helpful for the committee to know kind of where the bottom line is we would have to hit, or the 3.5% is not adequate. Thank you.
Representative Anderson. You're on the list. We can take you off if you'd like.
I'll be brief, I promise. All I'm asking is for the first page, as we heard that this is based on the high enrollment assumption, if we can get the low enrollment assumption and just get a copy of that, that's it.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
on page
please.
19.
Page 19. Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just another follow-up on sort of the revenue assumptions. Will the health care coverage drop if an individual who's receiving a partial subsidy lapses, doesn't pay their payments?
Representative Atkins.
And who will be canceling, the policies?
Madam Chair, and Representative Runbeck, if I don't understand your question and don't quite answer it, once folks are enrolled and they pay their premium, now they have a contract with their health carrier. No different than what currently people have now. I'm told also that there is a 90-day grace period that people have, but let's not make this out. I just want to always be clear that this is not a risk-bearing. This is not the insurer. The marketplace itself is not the insurance company. It's just a facilitator trying to bring a customer and a health carrier together. So that contract, once enrolled, is actually between the customer and the health insurance plan or health insurance carrier. Does that answer? Did I get what your question was?
Madam Chair, just so 90 days after you've failed to pay your monthly premium, coverage drops. Your health care coverage is no longer in force.
Madam Chair, I believe that's exactly the situation.
All right.
I'm looking to see if I've misunderstood it.
They're
but I believe
agreeing
that's-
with you behind you.
They're all nodding
Yes,
along?
there's a number of nods going on.
Well, he's the
behind
chairman, of course he agrees.
Yes.
Representative Runbeck.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Believe it or not, there are no other questions on the list. So I do want to say for the record that we want to let folks know that we do have the Minnesota Budget Project written testimony that we were all handed, and so that's part of the record. And then we all were given Mr. Mickelson, the owner and president of the RM Group. So, Representative Atkins, closing comments. I know this is this issue, we are very divided. There's no doubt, and the questions represent that. So I really want to thank everyone for the respectful conversation, even though it's frustrating for both sides at times. Everybody's been very civil and respectful, so I appreciate that. Representative Atkins?
Madam Chair, before, I'd like
Yes,
him to have the
please.
final word, of course, but I just asked for roll call.
Certainly, a roll call's been requested, and, I had asked for further amendments, didn't hear any. Representative Atkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a good bill. I appreciate your support.
Okay. Thank you so much, and roll call's been requested. Representative Liebling renews her motion for House File 5 as amended to Where, Representative Atkins, where are we going? Up to Ways and Means, to Ways and Means. Thank you. That's the motion, members. Okay. Go ahead.
Winchesky,
Yes.
Loeffler,
Yes.
Davids,
No.
Anderson,
No.
Barrett,
No.
Benson,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Dabney,
Yes.
Earhart,
Yes.
Garofalo,
No.
Hanson,
Yes.
Lesh,
Aye.
Liebling,
Yes.
Lilly,
Yes.
Loon, Mack,
No.
Markwart,
Yes.
Myra,
No.
Paymar,
Yes.
Pepin, Runbeck,
No.
Schoen,
Yes.
Simonson,
Yes.
Representative Anderson, while it's being tallied, your son is incredibly behaved. Wow. Yes. Okay, there being 14 ayes and 9 nays. The bill is passed and sent to Ways and Means. Members, sorry, I have a cough. I'm going to refer quickly House File 554, 555, 563, 660, 722, and 747 to Representative Dabney's committee. Thank you again, members. The bill is passed. We're adjourned.
Madam Chair, members.